after low crop prices in the late 1800s ushered in an agricultural depression, North Carolina's black sharecroppers and poor white tenant farmers quit farming and got better jobs in furniture factories. They were paid about $821 per year, about half of what the furniture workers in the North were paid. Race was a huge factor in keeping wages low. As one economic geographer wrote in 1934, "A great black laboring force has always done the hard labor of the South and is willing to do so and oftentimes do it better for less wages than those paid the white man."
Okay, so now race definitely comes into the picture. So let's get into this. So Black Americans are essentially the undocumented immigrants of the past. Exploited more and paid less. We really couldn't fight with our employer for workers' rights because there weren't worker protections for Black Americans. Or if there were any, it wasn't enforced. We would just be fired and they could replace us with someone else willing to take the exploitation out of desperation. So a few years ago, I used to work for Ashley Furniture Home Store, and I was a sales associate, and I sold furniture and mattresses to people day in and day out. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. Furniture can be a very big ticket item, depending on the quality, and it can last you a lifetime or it can last you a short while. Now, I've seen my fair share of good and bad furniture, and let me tell you, a lot of the bad ones are everywhere. Now, whether you go to Ashley, City Furniture, Rooms to Go, Canes, or IKEA, shoddy furniture is easy to find. But why? One word: profit. So I want to react to this clip from More Perfect Union, and we're going to learn in more detail about how furniture is made to be more shoddy. And again, I just want to shout out Roger Meadows about this story. Let's get into this. This is entitled, "It's Not Just Wayfair."
So I've been looking for a coffee.
So it's not just Wayfair. Why does all of your furniture fall apart? So we're going to get into that. So let me go to my timestamp. All right, let's go.
There was no Wayfair or Overstock or Amazon when my parents bought their first home in the late 80s in Ohio. There wasn't even an IKEA in our town. They relied on their neighbors and community to get used furniture like this side table. I found the exact same one on a furniture resale site. It's worth over $1,000. Definitely not something they'd have been able to afford at the time. When I moved into my first apartment in the city, they gave it to me. There's still a little bit of water damage, but it still looks good and it's standing sturdy. But when I look around at the furniture I bought myself, it's mostly boring IKEA designs, some Eames dupes, and literally outdoor furniture from Amazon. I doubt any of it will last till my next apartment, let alone the next generation.
It comes in pieces. If you have to like re-screw it, you've already ruined it because it's not actually wood.
I was talking about this with my coworker Gerald, and he showed me this beautiful table his grandmother bought in the 90s.
Damn, when did it become rare to actually have a solid wood table? When did this kind of thing stop being accessible to someone like my grandma, average income, and has this like heirloom table? There's nothing rickety on that table at all.
If you bought furniture in the US before the mid-2000s, chances are it was made in North Carolina. Both of these tables were, this one by a company called Broyhill, and this one by Henderson, founded by former Broyhill employees.
You guys remember Broyhill? Like, that company that company's been around, right? And I was, and you guys remember, those big, pieces of furniture, that wood furniture that was heavy, right? It has some heft to it. And so I remember those furniture, and that furniture lasted forever. I mean, that furniture was like a Keith Sweat song, like "Make it last forever." Oh my gosh! But yeah, okay, let's continue.
These days, North Carolina's furniture industry isn't doing so well, but when Broyhill was founded in 1926, it was kind of the perfect place to get into the furniture business. The state's first furniture factory had opened in the 1880s in a city called High Point. Then, at the turn of the century, High Point started holding a huge furniture expo where buyers spent billions of dollars on furnishings to sell in stores across the country. By the 60s, a full 60% of all furniture made in America would come from this 125-mile radius. And by the 80s, it had earned the nickname the Furniture Capital of America, beating out Chicago, New York City, and even Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was literally called Furniture City at the time. How did they do it? Well, making furniture comes down to 4 things: design, material, production, and transportation. North Carolina furniture makers were uniquely positioned to have an edge on all 4 of those. They didn't spend time or money on design, they just copied the pieces made by popular furniture companies of the day. And as for materials,
hang on, let's stop there. They copied. So really, this is why when people say, well, capitalism breeds innovation, no, it doesn't. Because they're literally copies upon copies upon copies. Like, how many different types of Cheerios do we really need? You got fruit Cheerios, you got apple cinnamon Cheerios, you got honey nut Cheerios, you got regular Cheerios, you got chocolate Cheerios, you got frosted Cheerios. What's next? Wasabi Cheerios? Like, come on now. Like, we have the same thing, just in different colors. Right? There's really no difference. It's just, it's, new color, that's just the way capitalism operates. So let's get into materials. This is the one I really want to get into.
Half the state is forest, full of hardwood trees: pine, oak, chestnut, and maple, perfect for making sturdy furniture. They found ways to cut production costs by making the furniture with cheaper woods and then covering it in hardwood veneers. Other ways to cut costs? Those early furniture companies focused on mass producing a few basic items, and they had access to a huge pool of cheap labor willing to do it.
So let's get into this. So one of the first things she talked about was wood veneers. So that's just something that we're taught in furniture school. So a wood veneer is basically a thin piece of hardwood that's put over cheap wood or a manufactured type wood in order to give it the visual of being a hardwood. But in reality, once you get that a thin piece of veneer off, you get that cheap ass wood, you got that particle board, you got that manufactured density wood that is basically just an amalgamation of the sawdust and wood chippings, right? And so that's all it basically is. But they do that to save costs, because let's say if you had a hard oak dresser, right? Number one, it's going to be significantly heavier, right? Because it's dense. But also, it's going to be more expensive because, well, you had to make that out of all pure oak. Versus if you use the shavings from many different types of woods and then just glued them together and compressed them, and then you just took a thin layer of that oak and placed it on top, well, you didn't have to spend as much money. And so people think that they got oak, but in reality, they actually didn't get oak, right? They just got a veneer of oak. And so then, yes, also it's lighter. So therefore, it's easier to transport. And easier to transport, it being lighter, also means fuel costs go down, right? Because you don't have to have transport something that's heavy. Number two, when it comes to the movers, the people who transport the furniture and things like that, there's less energy output from them, which means they're able to do more deliveries and things like that. So it's a cost cutting issue. And the thing is that Even though they cut the cost, what happens? The quality goes down. Okay, that's exactly what happens. But a lot of times, it's like, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to risk the quality of something? That's the tough part. All right, let's continue.
They had access to a huge pool of cheap labor willing to do it.
Also, a huge pool of cheap labor. So this is where we get into the aspect that capitalism brings, is that the cheap labor, when it comes to creating furniture, is something that makes me think about, and a lot of times, this is really before the huge boom of a lot of immigrants that were from the global south that were allowed to come in, right? So you have a lot of immigrants that come from African countries, South American countries, Asia, especially East Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. You have a lot of these countries that were, more open after the civil rights era, right? So a lot of what was happening here is actually pre-civil rights era. So who do you think the cheap labor came from? Yeah, people like, that were the same age as my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, right? So that's who the cheap labor came from. So that's exploitation. So let's get into it.
After low crop prices in the late 1800s ushered in an agricultural depression, North Carolina's black sharecroppers and poor white tenant farmers quit farming and got better jobs in furniture factories. They were paid about $821 per year, about half of what the furniture workers in the North were paid. Race was a huge factor in keeping wages low. As one economic geographer wrote in 1934, a great black laboring force has always done the hard labor of the South and is willing to do so and oftentimes do it better for less wages than those paid the white man.
Okay, so now race definitely comes into the picture. So let's get into this. So Black Americans are essentially the undocumented immigrants of the past. Exploited more and paid less. We really couldn't fight with our employer for workers' rights because there weren't worker protections for Black Americans. Or if there were any, it wasn't enforced. We would just be fired and they could replace us with someone else willing to take the exploitation out of desperation. So this is how we know that, even if, like when I was talking in the previous segment, even if they were just completely shut the border down and deport all the undocumented immigrants, there's going to be another class that's going to be exploited, or another group that's going to be exploited. They're not going to cede worker protections for us. They're not going to cede us, oh, well, all the undocumented immigrants are gone, so guess what? We're going to be able to have these jobs. They're going to be good paying jobs. No, they're not. These cappies are not going to go down without a fight. They're going to try to exploit the shit out of every single one of us. And if it's not going to be undocumented immigrants, it's going to be us, our Black asses. Because guess what? In that ladder, undocumented immigrants may be at the bottom right now, technically, when it comes to labor. But we're right there. And guess what? You take them away, who's the bottom? Right? This is why worker solidarity is so important among us, because the thing is, it's like we can't see ourselves above another people. That's the point, man. The moment you start to see yourself above another people, that's when you start to divide the working class, man. You gotta tame that. All right, let's continue. Let me see, where's my next point?
Factory owners also exploited the racial divide to prevent workers from unionizing, allowing them to pay both Black and white workers less. Obviously, having such low wages was a big part of why North Carolina could make furniture so much cheaper than New York and Chicago and Michigan. But this exact pattern, the industry moving its center to wherever the cheapest labor was, would repeat itself in less than a century. We'll get to that in a minute. The other big reason High Point became America's furniture capital was that it was perfectly located to transport all that furniture to stores across the country. It sat on the highest point of this railroad line. Get it? High Point. This one is important because if there's one enduring truth about furniture, it's that it's a pain in the ass to move.
Pivot! Pivot! Pivot!
So to buy furniture back then, you'd pick out something from a showroom near you. Then it would be carefully shipped to you by trusted professionals, and you'd probably keep that same piece for decades, maybe even pass it down to your kids. Even as globalization started shifting other industries in the 70s and 80s, High Point remained the center of US furniture manufacturing. Because how would you even ship a king-size bed across the ocean? The way to do it, it turns out, is so simple a moose can explain it.
The idea is beautiful Swedish design furniture at our lowest possible price. You pick up your catalog, choose the item, pick it up, take it home, and put it together.
Right. So those beautiful Swedish designs tended to be simple and focus on detachable elements so that everything could fit in a flat pack box. They also used lighter materials like MDF and particle board, which are made from wood chips, sawdust, and shavings glued together in the shape of a board. Knockdown furniture, as it's also called, can be shipped easily and more efficiently, and the customers save some of the labor costs by putting it together themselves. When IKEA opened,
it's kind of funny because even though the customers save on the labor cost, the funny part was you're either going to get, you're either going to get charged for time or for money, right? So that's one thing that we used to talk about, right? When I sold furniture, like some people would say, well, we just want to put it together ourselves, so we don't have to pay that extra delivery fee. Because now we just started doing delivery fees. And we will automatically add the delivery fee. Of course, we would tell you that we're adding the delivery fee because, we can't just tag it on there. But we would tell you, and then if somebody was like, oh, I don't want to pay that delivery fee, well, then it's like, okay, well, do you want to put it together yourself? And some people would say, yeah, we can put it together ourselves, but at the same time, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to do, especially, some people, they may not have, physical ability to be able to move furniture around like that. And so, of course, unfortunately, because, they wanted to, sell it around the world. Well, they also made it more modular, but in making it more modular, you have to make it more lighter to be able to move around, number one. And number two, that's why you had the MDF and then the particle board. And then on top of that, you made out of cheaper products. I mean, this is basically the equivalent of having self-checkout now, right? Like they'll say that we're passing on the savings to you, but it's like, are you really even saving anything though? For the most part, it's just an interesting concept,
opened its first store in the US in 1985, only 2% of the furniture in the US was flat packed. Within 7 years, it was up to 10%.
It definitely readjusted what people expect. No one is expecting a full piece of furniture to arrive at their doorstep fully assembled.
With the rise of flat-packed furniture, North Carolina was starting to lose some of its competitive edge because now it wasn't that important for factories to be located close to the retail stores. Remember how North Carolina's cheap labor made it the manufacturing center of the US? Well, you know who has even cheaper labor than North Carolina? China. That became extremely relevant in 1999 with the US-China World Trade Organization agreement. The US agreed to cut tariffs on Chinese imports, and China would do the same for US imports. This was meant to foster more trade.
We'll be able to export products without exporting jobs.
What actually happened was the opposite of that. Through the 2000s, American furniture makers started moving factories from North Carolina to China, laying off more than 1,000 American workers a year. By 2000,
So looks like Willie P was the one who signed NAFTA, is one of the reasons why a lot of people lost their jobs, and they wonder why the Democrats are hated by so many working class people, especially within the Rust Belt and in Middle America. Boy, I tell you.
2005, 36% of their sales came from furniture they imported from China. But don't worry, that backfired for them pretty quickly. The Chinese factory owners they contracted with learned how to make American-style furniture and started their own companies competing directly with US manufacturers. Here's how important cheap labor is. Chinese companies could import US lumber, make the furniture, ship it back to the US for assembly, and still afford to sell it for less than American companies could. Within 7 years, 60% of the US furniture market was controlled by Chinese companies. There were 700,000 Americans working in furniture manufacturing in 2000. By 2010, it was down to about 350,000, half the industry gone in a decade. Factory closures hit North Carolina the hardest. Entire towns were left unemployed.
That is what we live off of here in this county is furniture.
And in 2007, as if to put salt in the wound, IKEA opened a warehouse just an hour away from High Point.
So yeah, this has had a gigantic, devastating effect on America. You know, as far as what they did in regards to NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. NAFTA and other trade agreements devastated the working class, especially in smaller towns and cities. So China was able to get these jobs because the corporations were so willing to take them away from Americans and give them to the Chinese. So, but here's the thing, China's not to blame. It's just American corporations are. You know, it's just like if you have a bike as a child and you enjoy that bike, you love riding that bike, but your parent takes that bike away and gives it to the neighbor kid across the street who doesn't have a bike, are you going to blame the neighbor kid for accepting the bike? Are you going to blame them for it? Or are you going to blame the parent for taking the bike away? See what I mean? And so that's the problem, is that they took the bike away. And then China was able to build up their country very quickly. And now they're quickly becoming the world's top economic superpower, because they also learned from these American companies, and then they ditched the American companies and then started their own companies to start to sell their own stuff. So they realized, okay, yeah, these guys are also trying to exploit us for cheap labor, but guess what? We're going to have our own businesses and we're not going to exploit our workers anymore. And so now that whole ethos, that mentality that, oh, well, Chinese, workers are all exploited, that's out the window. Of course, exploitation still probably happens, but probably on a lot smaller doses now. And so a lot of Chinese workers are now, they're unionized and they're making a living wage now. If you go on Red Note, you will see a lot of Chinese people are living well within their means because the cost of living is actually decent, right? A lot of Chinese people, like, their rent is a quarter of what they make per month. So if you're making $4,000 a month, your rent's only $1,000, right? That's the equivalent of what will be here, right? If you're making $4,000 a month. So if they're making $1,000 a month, well, your rent's $250. You see what I mean? And that's basically the equivalent of what, if you're making, that's the equivalent of what's going on in China right now, right? And I was looking at their grocery hauls. My God, they can afford carts and carts full of groceries because, right, the cost for everything is a lot lower. Plus, they got a lot of local farms and stuff like that where people are able to bring in their produce and stuff. So, the cost of living is a lot better there. So let's continue.
There's one more important part of IKEA's strategy that the Moose didn't mention, but you can see it in this IKEA ad from 2002 that Spike Jonze directed for some reason.
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
In other words, forget heirlooms for your grandkids, throw away your old furniture, and buy new. And they got people to do it by continuously dropping prices. Get the prices down and you increase sales. We created that demand, not the consumer, a former IKEA exec told The Guardian. Look at this IKEA catalog from 1985, the year the first US store opened. These 4 iconic products are still for sale today, but they cost less now than they did back then. How is that possible? Before I answer that, I need to tell you about one more thing that disrupted the furniture industry, racksandstands.com. Never heard of them? Well, you've probably bought something from them, or as they're known today, Wayfair. At first, racksandstands.com only sold, well, racks and stands, but today Wayfair sells every type of home furnishing. They have a massive catalog of more than 14 million products. Compare that to IKEA's measly 12,000. But their strategy has remained the same since the racks and stands days. Drop shipping Chinese-made furniture with free delivery.
It's important to note that Wayfair doesn't design anything. They're just working with like over 11,000 suppliers. They're going to take the photos, add it to their website. They might give it a different name. Then when a customer goes on to a Wayfair and buys that lamp, they'll go, oh, hey, supplier, I need you to fulfill this order for me. Can you please package it up and deliver it to this person? You don't have to own any of the supply and you can still sell it.
All right. So that's another variable that a lot of people, may not have thought about. But I want to go into this. So Wayfair is essentially the middleman, right? It's like Amazon. It's a marketplace for website for other producers so that they get a cut of the profits for producing and being able to have for producers to be able to have their products on the website and being featured on it. So when I was at Ashley Furniture, we had our own products at City Furniture, Rooms to Go, and American Signature. And now you can find Ashley Furniture products on Amazon. And one of the things about working at Ashley Furniture is also a furniture manufacturer. They just don't sell furniture, they manufacture it too. So you have Ashley Furniture and then Ashley Furniture Home Store, which is the retail locations where they sell the furniture. And so, of course, there's factories here in Orlando, right? Not here in Orlando, I'm sorry. There's factories in, I think, Brandon, I think it is. It's going west. But yes, they literally have the factories there. They produce the furniture there and then they ship it there. That's why Ashley Furniture typically, even though they're kind of middle price point, they can actually sell their furniture for a little bit cheaper because they are able to save on that because there is no middleman, right? So when it comes to Ashley Furniture, our own products were in other stores too. So there was other middlemen trying to make money off of Ashley Furniture.
Direct-to-consumer brands popped up throughout the 2010s. Most of them use a fast fashion business model. Instead of selling a few well-made pieces that could last a lifetime, they have every single micro-aesthetic possible. Wayfair today is actually these 5 sites, each focusing on a different style and price point. And since consumers started focusing more on trends than quality, manufacturers realized they could cut all kinds of corners, cheaper materials and shoddy construction. This is what I wanted to dig into with Coco.
If I had to guess, this was made 70s, maybe 80s.
We chose to compare these 2 tables because they seemed representative of their eras. The Wayfair table was made in China. It's shipped partially disassembled in a flat pack box, and it's marketed for its classic style, not to last long, but to match a customer's current aesthetic preference.
All right, so let's get into this because I think this is something that a lot of us have observed, especially with brand new furniture. If you purchase brand new furniture within the last, I'd say 10, 15 years, maybe. But this is the issue with today's furniture where form matters more than function. Durability takes a backseat and is prioritized much higher than quality. This is why, these companies engage in what I like to call planned obsolescence. So I want to stop here for a second. I just want to share with you guys, what is planned obsolescence? So this is something that I think a lot of people need to get familiar with, this particular term, because planned obsolescence is a nasty thing, right? So let me share this with you guys. So you guys know exactly what this means. So, all right. So what is planned obsolescence? Let me enlarge just so you guys can see very well. And am I enlarged? Nope. Let's change that. All right. So what is planned obsolescence? Planned obsolescence describes the practice of designing products to break quickly or become obsolete in the short to mid-term. The general idea behind this is to encourage sales of new products and upgrades, a practice that has been banned in some countries. The strategy is attributed to the motor industry in the United States, where in 1924, General Motors executive Alfred P. Sloan Jr. suggested launching new models every year to keep sales moving. So that is planned obsolescence, making it, they plan to make it obsolete so that you buy more of it, right? I liken it to like this. For instance, remember how back in the day you would have a refrigerator, and that refrigerator lasts like 20, 30 years, right? Now you get a new refrigerator, it may last you a decade, right? So many different things that now break down easy over time. They're made of cheaper materials, but that's also planned because they want you to keep coming back to buy more, right? It's the same thing when it comes to clothes and shoes, fast fashion. It's the same thing. Hell, planned obsolescence is really in healthcare too. Because if you are easily keep getting sick, and if there's no cure, then guess what? You have to keep coming back. See what I mean? Planned obsolescence is everywhere. That's part of capitalism, because it depresses quality for the sake of profit so that it can keep on growing. So I'm glad I was able to share that with you guys, because a lot of times people don't realize, man, these companies, it's nefarious, right? They sell you this so you can keep getting profit. They can keep getting profit, and they can keep selling you products. So let's go back into the next one. So
This table from Ethan Allen was likely made in North Carolina. It was probably delivered in a single piece, and it was built with the classic style so that it could be used for generations.
You guys remember Ethan Allen? I think there's still an Ethan Allen here in Orlando. But yeah, Ethan Allen's actually one of those more premium type of furniture companies that, you have to have some experience to just sell in Ethan Allen. Ethan Allen and Bears. I know that those two are more of the higher end furniture stores, but that's some solid furniture typically. I don't know how they are now, but definitely it's definitely more solid than it was back in the day. I'm sorry, it definitely was solid back in the day, but I'm not sure exactly as of right now. But let's continue.
This is obviously a maple table.
Yeah.
What's very exciting is the 2-tier level. That's something that you don't really see anymore.
It also has a solid wood drawer.
Modern drawers are always going to be made out of like plywood or particle board.
And that's when there are drawers at all.
Companies are hesitant to put drawers and doors in storage because that just makes the product so much more expensive.
The other thing to note about this drawer is the way it's attached to the table.
these beautiful dovetail joints that you can kind of see
Yeah.
as they flare out. And that just helps with grip and the joinery, the way that it's connected, making for really solid construction. A really beautiful design feature and lends itself to the durability of the overall piece.
What's the less good way to join?
Oh man, I mean, you can see everything from it just glued or pinned in place. There's probably 100 different ways that you could make this drawer, but the dovetail would be in the top 5 ways in terms of quality.
Yeah. First up,
So when they talked about that, actually, that was one of the things that was taught to us as well, is we had to look at the quality of the pieces. And, you know, as we were being trained, we actually had to look at the different qualities of the pieces by opening them up. And once you looked at it, you found that, I mean, like, depending on the higher end pieces were very durable. Like, one of the trainers, he was actually able to put one of the drawers, take one of the drawers out, put it on the floor, and he actually stepped inside of it. This guy had to be 210, 220, 6'2", you know, was able to stand inside of one of the drawers and the drawer wouldn't break, you know. But if he were to do one of the lower cost drawers, he would have broke that bitch. He would have broke it. My goodness. But the thing is like, look, he, you know, but that's the thing. They also do different price points. But the thing is, like, the higher price point, the more durability it was. I'm telling you right now. That's something that a lot of people, you know, need to take into consideration. All right, we're going to be getting into that in a second.
a materials test.
Okay, so I'm going to start in this one area where you do see a little bit of water damage here. So obviously this looks like this is still the maple. So my guess would be that this is actually solid maple and not veneered at all. I don't know if you saw that water damage that was there, but just by knocking it down, I could very easily sand this entire thing and refinish it, no problem.
Meanwhile, the Wayfair table.
So as you can see, we've got our primer layer underneath, and we also have MDF, a medium density fiberboard. The dust from MDF is far more dangerous than the dust of plywood or any sawdust. It's also really bad for water. Old IKEA lac tables or something that get really bubbly, that's because water has penetrated the MDF layer.
Next, we decided to
So the MDF is like plentiful in these furniture stores. I'm gonna tell you right now. Or if you want to go to get really cheap furniture, say you go to Walmart, something that you have to put together is inside of a flat black box, and then you put it together yourself. It's mostly made out of medium density fiberboard, MDF, or particle board, like the desk that I'm using right now to do this stream. But the thing is like, yeah, that's what they use, especially because that is what is cheap, right? And they can give it to you at that cheap price. But at the same time, like she said, the dust from that is actually more toxic for you, right? Which goes into show how nefarious companies are, because they really don't care about your health when it comes to their products. And so once they put it together, it's like, well, you know, it can be toxic for people. We really don't care. And so it sucks, but it is what it is.
to test how strong the tables were with a little tensile strength test.
Okay, let's see this next one. Okay, beautiful. Let's go check out our chunks. First of all, this is really impressive to me. Like super impressive that it really only broke along the seam line, and you can tell that that is maple all the way through. And also like around the apron, like this is still screwed together.
So let's continue on, because I want to talk about this next piece here. So
MDF and particle board instead of solid wood frames, and in place of traditional joinery techniques, they attach the pieces together with brackets so you can assemble it at home. Today's couches also cut corners on leather quality and use lower density foam inside. It's no wonder couches are less comfortable and don't last as long. This is also how IKEA manages to keep lowering the price on the same item. And the strategy works. Today, IKEA reports selling one Billy bookcase every 5 seconds and making one every 3 seconds. All these trends have caused furniture to get cheaper relative to the price of other consumer goods. Today, you can furnish an apartment for less than the cost of 1 month's rent in some places. And I think it's important to say here, for a lot of us, fast furniture is our only option. As housing prices skyrocket and wages stay stagnant, most of us can't afford new high-quality furniture, and looking for stuff secondhand is time-intensive. So
let's stop there just for a second, because I want to also get into this when it comes to the cost. It says this is the issue of furniture today, where the economic factor. It means that many of us can't buy new furniture of yesterday, so we're given the shoddy, cheap furniture today, where the companies still make profit, but we have to keep buying furniture over and over because it's low quality. So it's definitely not your grandma's floor model TV. That's for damn sure. Remember floor model TVs? Remember being sick as a little kid and you had to stay home and watch Price is Right or General Hospital? And the Price is Right came on, and then General Hospital came on, or The Young and the Restless. And you watching it on that big old floor model TV. Don't get me started. Watching their stories. Memories. All right, let's continue on.
Until we solve these issues, fast furniture probably isn't going anywhere. That was especially evident during the pandemic. During the lockdown, I started working from home and bought a desk from Wayfair, and I wasn't the only one. Wayfair was up 50% in customers. Fast furniture hasn't even reached its peak, but it's already led us to dystopian places, like Amazon announcing a $20 couch. You know that thing's gonna end up in a landfill within a year. Now, to sum things up, I'm gonna turn to an unexpected source.
North Carolina, you were the furniture capital of the world, but now so much of that business has been stolen from you and it's made in China and other places. You buy some of these chairs that they sell you now, they break after about 2 months. People are laying on the floor. And then on top of it all, you get sued because they fell out of a chair at a hotel.
That sounds a little too specific to be hypothetical.
Okay, look, I don't mean to laugh, but number one, that was very specific. Donald Trump is too rich to be talking about that type of stuff. Like, right? And another thing is, that's true. Like, this stuff is so cheap. Like, how, you can't even, child. Oh my gosh.
At first glance, this narrative sounds really similar to the one I've told you, but they do differ in some key ways, so let's take it one part at a time. First, it's true that North Carolina furniture jobs moved overseas, but it's worth noting that these were still decisions made by CEOs. If more companies had prioritized their workers over profits during that transition, the impact could have been less severe on American workers. The other claim Trump makes is that furniture got worse because of this move to China. But just because your furniture was made in Asia, it doesn't mean it's inherently worse.
When you visit these factories, there's like beautiful craftsmen and women bringing these products to life and giving them individual care and attention.
Plus, a single factory is probably making high, medium, and low quality furniture.
This goes to what I say, the higher end or the higher price points. So if you go to a furniture store, of course, they're going to have their high, medium, and low price points, right? And so, of course, the lower price points are the people, the cheaper it is, the more people can afford it. That means it's going to be more plentiful within the furniture store. So you're going to have more of those than you are going to have the higher price points, because as people's, cost of living continues to get higher, then less and less people will be able to afford the higher quality. That's just the way it goes.
All the furniture companies are sourcing from like the same 10 major places.
So Wayfair stuff, Restoration Hardware stuff could be being made by the same
Crate and
factory.
Barrel, yeah, they could all be made by the same factory very easily.
And what you don't hear Trump talk about is what happens when those retailers set super low prices. It puts the burden on factories to meet those price points.
The factories are in bidding wars against each other.
Right.
You're sending out one spec, and sometimes you're getting 2 different samples from 2 different places, and oftentimes you're going with the cheapest one.
Only one person can win that contract. That's how you end up with videos like these, showing furniture workers in Vietnam brought in to eat, sleep, and work at the factory.
So this is the point, whenever they have these low price points, well, they have to pay the workers even less. And if they're not going to be paying the workers even less, then what are they also going to have to do? They have to cut corners. Those corners they cut when it comes to safety regulations, or the corners that they cut are for quality regulations, right? When the quality goes down, then it's just not going to be as good. And even, the safety regulations when it comes to like the type, like how toxic are the glues that are being used in some of these furnitures? How toxic are the foams being used in some of this furniture, right? Some of these things that a lot of times people don't talk about, some of the chemicals that are used within the fabrics and stuff. Of course, we have some set standards, but standards aren't really that high of a quality. It's just a minimal standard so that, we won't get super sick when we come in contact with it. But that's ultimately how it goes. So that's how they make their profit.
The only people positively benefiting are people who are like C-level executives who basically show investors, oh, look at how much profit I've driven.
Trump claims to have the solution for the entire American furniture industry: tariffs.
All of your furniture makers are going to come back bigger and stronger and better than ever before.
That's an interesting promise, because Trump had already imposed higher tariffs on China during his first term, and Biden left those tariffs in place. So they've been in effect for nearly a decade now, and still furniture jobs have continued to decline in North Carolina. Chinese manufacturers simply moved their factories to countries that aren't subject to US tariffs, like Vietnam. The other reason tariffs aren't going to bring jobs back for US furniture workers is that tariffs are just one small part of a furniture company's overhead costs.
Human labor is the most valuable thing on the planet.
All right. So, of course, we talked about tariffs earlier in the prior segment. When it comes to tariffs, it's just going to be passing on the cost to the consumer. Because tariffs are the companies aren't going to pay them. You, the American, you're going to be the one that pays for them. So it's true that manufacturing will need to come back, but that depends on who's running the company rather than merely changing their minds. So that's another variable.
It's always the question of where can we find the cheapest human labor.
So the factories will just follow wherever the cheapest labor is.
Absolutely.
Wages have always been the driving force behind the furniture industry's move, first from Michigan, Chicago, and New York to North Carolina, then to China, and now to Vietnam and other countries.
See how capitalism works? See, it'll start in places up north, right? See, Michigan, Chicago, and New York. Then it goes to North Carolina. Then it goes over to China. Then it goes to Vietnam and other countries. And it's going to keep bouncing around until it can find the cheapest spot. But then what's going to happen when it can't find any more spots? Well, guess what? The quality of the furniture is going to go down even further, right? Or then the prices of these furniture is going to go up. And so that's the part about capitalism, right? Because look, if these companies were worker owned, they probably would still be in Michigan, Chicago, and New York. They probably wouldn't have moved. We'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit, but just wanted to point that out.
And what effect will tariffs have on consumers? Well, furniture companies claim tariffs will force them to raise prices, but we should be skeptical of that narrative as well. IKEA's strategy of lowering prices to increase consumer demand shows that their prices can and will change regardless of various countries' trade policy. Tariffs are neither a magic bullet to bring back jobs, nor are they the only reason that you might pay higher prices. The reason why nearly 500,000 American furniture workers lost their jobs is the same reason your couch sucks. Choices made by modern multinational corporations to prioritize profits at the expense of workers and consumers. So, if we want to make America great at domestic furniture production again, how do we do it? Well, North Carolina's furniture industry is not dead. High Point.
All right, so let's get into this because I'm going to actually disagree with her for a second.
Market still brings in $6.73 billion into the state each year. That's the equivalent of 4 Super Bowls. And big CEOs can follow the example of people like John Bassett, who fought tooth and nail to keep his furniture business in the US, saving hundreds of jobs. He actually got a lot of hate for doing that, from other furniture manufacturers, Washington lobbyists, and right-wing American economists. Beth Macy, who profiled Bassett for her book Factory Man, says that one economist told her, "In reality, we shouldn't be making bedroom furniture anymore in the United States." But Bassett believed those jobs had value and that they were important to his community. For workers in the Piedmont region, furniture manufacturing was a good, decent-paying job that people had pride in. If America is going to play a role in furniture manufacturing again, we need more people like Bassett who value both quality products and good jobs, instead of pitting consumers and workers against each other.
Now, here is where I disagree with this person. Let me enlarge just so y'all can see myself. We do not need any more big CEOs at the top. Depending on a benevolent CEO to do the right thing in a capitalist system where profit reigns supreme is never going to work. What's the better solution? Well, I'm glad you asked. Workers should collectively own the manufacturer and operate it democratically. From the producers of the raw materials all the way to the sales floor and delivery. If you put the power in the hands of the workers, this ensures that the quality and jobs remain in America. This type of structure is called a worker cooperative or a worker co-op. In this way, the workers share the profits and make a living wage as well. Workers aren't going to screw over their own environment for a profit because they have to live there. They're not going to ship their own jobs overseas because they need those jobs. They're going to ensure the quality because they need their products to have real value, and customer satisfaction will ensure that. This is why we need to leave capitalism and go the way of a worker-centered economic system. Really great points. But we got to get workers in power and the corporate dictators out. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.